Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next office hours. This is a thoughts on Keynote is kind of what I'm calling it. And it's really not a how to use Keynote or an introduction to Keynote. It's more talking about some of the ways that I approach Keynote and hopefully that all of us approach it. So I think a bunch of us use it. I will say from the outset that the reason that I'm talking about Keynote and the reason we'll probably talk about it in the education hour more often than not, maybe every month or every quarter, or give it its own hour at some point, is because I think it's probably one of the most powerful communications tools ever made. I know that sounds like a really big word, but the ease of use of being able to be able to use ideas and communicate ideas is probably better on this application than anything else that exists. So I think that it's important that people who at least have access to it know how to use it or ways to think about it. So again, if you're watching and you have access to Makana, go ahead and throw suggestions and ideas of things that I may or may not be missing, things that you think are important for us to cover, or things that you're curious about related to that, because this is really more of an open discussion and not a webinar. So I am going to show you a couple little things about how I approach it. The first thing that I will say is that the first thing that I do, so I want to talk a little bit about my Keynote process. I'm going to show you a handful of example slides, and then we're going to just go into questions. I'll keep on showing little bits and pieces as we answer those, but it's going to be largely driven by your questions. So know that if you're not asking those questions, this will be a really short hour. I'm not a very good lecturer, but I'm pretty good at answering questions. So, and it's not just me. I will keep track of the panelists' views. So if the panelists have things they'd like to add to that, please go ahead and do that and vote up those questions that you'd like the most. We're going to do this for an hour because we'll cut it off at the end of the hour, because I don't think we need to do more than that. We'll do it again. So it'll give you something to think about. So the first thing that I'll say about Keynote is that I'm very methodical about how I build keynotes. And I should show a keynote here, but I'm not going to, because all my keynotes are set up for something. So I'm not going to have another slide deck for the slide deck. But I start in notes. So I always do all of my keynotes all start as a list of notes. Now, Keynote has its own outlining tool. I prefer notes because notes show up on all my devices. So while I'm thinking about a keynote, I want the list of what I want to talk about done in Apple Notes, so that it's on every device that I have. I just type them in. I'm able to work on it. And that's how I work out ideas. The reason that I do that, and I think it's really important, this is a general presentation recommendation, is that the reason that I do that is to get a flow, get the storyline. I mean, Sky often talks about, what's the story and where the story. It is so easy to get lost in a presentation. It is if you start working slide by slide by slide, by the end, you have a bunch of great looking slides that don't have a thread, because and you also lose a lot of time of, you'll spend a half an hour looking for the right photo for a slide that you're going to end up getting rid of. So doing that outline, I think is really important to kind of thread your thoughts. And I even, a lot of times when I'm thinking about a presentation, will do it in my head. Like, I'm going to go to this and what's the story? And if I can't say it in my head of like, this is the general flow of it, I usually don't even start writing things down until then. Now, the next thing that I do typically is I will go to my iPad. So I know this is kind of this roundabout thing to do. But what I do is if I cut this here. So here you can see on my iPad here. And what I'll do is I'll oftentimes just add, blank pages, a lot of them. Oftentimes I'll just add all the blank pages that I want to put here. And there might be a better way to do this, and I'm open to suggestion. But what I'm going to do is try to get through as many of these slides as a sketch before I start building them into slides. So I keep everything kind of with my pencil, and I just start working through them. And all of this may sound like extra work, but I have found over 1,000 slide decks that this is the fastest way for me to create a usable slide deck as I start to build it. So first I think about it a lot. Then I write it down in notes. Then I go into, and I'll literally, what it looks like is me just going, I'm going to have a box here, here, here. And then I'm going to have this title here, here, here. Now I might write out the titles. I have horrible handwriting, so it won't look that much different than this. And then I'll say, and I want this one to, slide in this way, this one to slide in this way, this one to slide in that way. So it's basically like these little storyboards. And then and then I might go to the next one and I'll say, okay, I want this to be a big box over here. And so I'm thinking about that object and I'm trying to think about how I want to connect those. But that's my next step. And I'll literally go through it and then I'll play it back while I'm working to see whether, sorry, I got a lot of buttons in front of me, to see whether I like that flow. But I'm working on that flow. I'm working on those bits and pieces. And it's a very methodical way to do it. Now, the cool thing about doing this in an iPad in Keynote is that when I'm done, I just hit save and I can open that on my Mac. Now, I know this will sound roundabout, is that I started notes, then I go to Keynote, I hand draw them all, then I bring them back into the Keynote on the Mac, and then I build out my Keynote document. I don't try to sketch on my Mac, and I don't try to finish on my iPad. The iPad's too many clickety clicks with your hands and the way that the interface works. I find that to slow me down. So, but it's really powerful to have the annotation feature on it before I get started. So that's kind of how I approach building the document ahead of time. And again, I'm going to show you a couple things that are hopefully useful for you that are just some of the things that I use as kind of building blocks of things that are kind of cool, that are a little different than what is there. And then, of course, if you have questions about more straightforward things or how I approach certain processes, by all means, definitely not raise your hand, but put your questions into Makana and we'll go from there. So let me also cut to now. Let's see here. So here's a couple things that I really like to use a lot, and I'll show you a couple like 2 examples of it, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. So if we cut to this, one of the things you'll see here is I have this little box here and then a big box down here. What I'm using to get from one to the other, these are 2 different slides, but I'm using this thing called Magic Move. And I use Magic Move a lot. So when I'm building these out, and what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, I want to, and the way that this gets built, here, I'll get rid of this so you can kind of see it. So you have to duplicate the slide. You can't redraw the slide. You cut and paste the slide so that it has the same ID. And what I can do now is take this and I can move it over here and I can, let's say, scale it up. And this I already have because I copied it before. I usually copy it when I usually copy it before I add the magic slide. So now they both have the same ID. They know what this slide, they both have the same one there. And so if I hit preview, you'll see that this happens here. And so, and of course you have, you can slow that down a little bit to make it fly through, but you're going from one object to another. Now that may not make a lot of sense. Like, why would I need a square to do that? Well, if I go to this one and let's hit play, this is like how you identify, let's say, problematic systems. So if I hit this, I can say, well, everything when you start looks the same, but over time, some get better and some get worse and some turn red. And then you want to actually group them and all of this goes there. That's kind of how, this is actually from a presentation. So that's how you can use those. And those are 3 separate slides. But what I did is I duplicated it 3 times. And then I duplicated the first one. And then I, just made these little, if I make this a little bit bigger. And again, I think that one of the things that's really interesting is I can just tell you that would take a very long time to do in Motion or After Effects or anywhere else. Anybody who uses those apps, that would take a long time to do that compared to what I'm doing here, and being able to just constantly edit it and to make it all work. So that's one way that I use Magic Slide, the Magic transition a lot. Now, another thing that I do is, let me show you, let me kind of play with it a little bit here, is I can, let's say add a shape here. And I want these shapes to come in at a certain cadence. And so with each one of these, you have these build systems. And of course, a lot of these tools have these build systems, but I use them a lot. What I don't want to do is have you actually see more than I want you to see until it's ready. So with my build-in, I might say, okay, I want this one to pop. I might want this one to fade and scale. That's very slow, but we'll see. And then I have, and you have a lot of options here. The ones I don't use almost at all are these special effects. These are the ones that are like, yay. I don't use those. So, I mean, I work in corporate, so that's not really to me a usable one. So everything down here in the special effects are things that I don't think I use. I'm just looking through them to make sure I don't think I use any of them ever. So let's see. Yeah, see all little smoke things that there. So I mean, I think it's fine that I think there's places for them. It's just not usually in what I'm doing. But other ones that are really nice are, you can have a lot, like move in is one that I like. Now that doesn't make sense, but I can move it in from the other side, so right to left. So now if I go to this and I hit play, you have one that pops, one that kind of scales up, and one that slides in this way. And so it's you want to think about how that actually is going to work. Like, how do I want to introduce those things? I can have one slide in this way, one slide in that way, one pop up. Almost never will I show you everything all at one time. Now, the other thing that's important is to understand that it's not just when they come in. If you look at this here, I have obviously duration, but this is the most powerful button in all of these transition is build order. So in build order, let me pop this up here. What you can see are these, that you can see what they are and what order they're coming in. Now, what I can do is I can set this to say, this is on click. Right now they're all on click. But I can have this go, I want you to do this with build one or after build one. And what it'll do is it'll group those together. And I can set a delay. So I can say, I want you to build it. Again, I want to build it after, but I want you to wait 0.2 seconds before you actually start to do that. So this becomes kind of a way for you to make that happen. So now if I, preview this, it pops up and then it fades in. Now it would normally, if I was playing it, it waits for me to bring the next one in. So I might have a couple things that I want to do to see how this works. I grabbed a slide from an older presentation. Well, not that old, but so if you look at this one, what you can see is I've got all these little headlines. And so I say after the transition, so I don't have to do it on click. This is when I cut to the new slide. This, I want you to go ahead. I could have a delay and wait for a second, or I could have it just come right immediately. I'm going to go out of another slide. I'm going to go into this slide. And when I get to it, I want you to go ahead and do a pop. And these are all pops. I'm going to pop, 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 pop. But with the rest of these, I'm saying I want you to go after build one, after build two, after build three, after build four. Now I could have them all do it with the ones above two. So I could there's a couple different ways of doing that, but then I have something that I want to kind of solve at the end. So what I can do is if I hit this, we'll go back to the slide before this so you get kind of the sense of it. So you have this, we have this slide in there. Now, when I go to the next slide, it's going to just start popping things up. So now I'm talking about all the problems that social media has and blah, 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 blah. And I'm talking through all those things. And all these things are just kind of popping up while I'm talking. I don't have to keep on hitting my click button for them to appear. But then I want to say, oh, and by the way, there's no fix for this. So anyway, so the point is that now that is a different transition, but that's waiting for me. So I have an automated system to go through those things while I'm talking. And then it's waiting for me to say the point that I want to make, to that process. So that's a way that, and again, what you want to think about, you have so much control in Keynote. You want to think about what you're trying to say and how to really put an emphasis on every little bit that you're putting in there. Now, another thing that I want to introduce, and I know I've been talking too long, so we're going to jump to questions here in a second. But the last thing I want to introduce here is, really understanding how much you have the ability to do when you start adding things. So if I add a slide, media is a big tool. So you have a lot of options here. So I can add stuff obviously from my image gallery or photos. But I can also add a web video. So adding a web video is literally adding a YouTube video to my Keynote, or music, or record. I can record audio, or I can add live video. This is what I don't think will work well. I don't Oh, I'm sitting there not showing you what I'm talking about. So anyway, sorry about that. Anyway, so what I have here is inside of media, I have all these different options. So for instance, if I wanted to take a picture, like if I'm working on something and I'm building a tutorial, I can literally just go in here and say, I want to take a photo, and it literally becomes available. So when I do this, my phone just immediately says, okay, I'm ready to take a photo. I'm ready to take a photo. So it's linking Keynote to your iPhone to take a picture. And this is something that I use a lot when I'm kind of playing with stuff. So, so now what I do is I guess I could have shown you the photo, but if I take the photo and I hit, you won't see me do that, but I'll say use photo, boom, there's my daughter paints rocks for me. So anyway, that's the photo that I just took. So now I can sit there and work through that. Another thing before the last thing I'll say, and then we can show other things. I'm just going to start showing you the things that I thought would be useful, is also understanding how much control you have over these edges and so on and so forth. So when you go into the format here, inside of all of these things, you have your picture frames and so on and so forth. So you can go in here and say, okay, I want a line around it, but more importantly, I can do a picture frame. I like soft edges. So I have those, and you can also decide, how big those edges are. You can make them tighter or softer there, as you kind of work through it. And then we talked a little bit about the live video, but the live video here will probably cause you can see here that I have, the live video, going to go to my switcher, which will create that is the live video coming in. You can see that it's pretty responsive, but that's our switcher going back into it. So that's what I was trying to fix before the show that I wasn't able to fix, but now you can see it. So anyway, so that's some basics. The only last thing that I want to show here, well, we'll answer some questions and I'll show one more thing at the end. Just how the Insta Alpha works, unless someone asks a question earlier than that. Anyway, so let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Our first question comes from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Alex says no bullets. How do you do that?
Okay, that's great. So the main thing is that, what you want to look at when you start to think about this is not to think about it as bullets, but really watch broadcast. So broadcast, you don't see bullets in broadcast very often. And so a lot of times when I'm doing that, I'm going to think about headers that I want to, like things that I want to say. And so if I cut to here and I go, I'm going to oftentimes build a, I like, as I said before, I like to have, so I might have something like this, or actually it might be more like this. By the way, the snap tools are your friend. Anyway, so I might have this. Now what I'm going to do, and this one isn't quite the same size, so we'll pull it open. You'll notice that I'll get to where I think it's about to be, and I'll let it snap to place so that, and you can grab all of these and they'll automatically center to the frame. So if you want to center all of these to a frame, I'm really picky about that. Anyway, so now I might say this. Now you can put the objects into the frame, or you can, keep the, a lot of times I have a tendency to add text as a separate item, then, because that way I'm not limited to what this box will do. But you can, of course, just double click on this and say, this is an idea. And then you have this is an idea here. Now, the big thing is that I will do things like this all the time. So it's not that I don't make lists. I make them graphic. And a lot of times the other thing I'll do is I'll try to make that idea, I'll try to make it something like this. And we'll pull this down here. And so I'll incorporate something I wanted to show here. So I will go to, I'm just going to grab, what I'm doing, searching for idea. I'm going to grab a image. By the way, one little ninja tip for you is that if you, let's see, put this idea in, hit images. A couple things about grabbing images off the web that might be useful for you. Number one, tools, size, large. Now it only shows you the things that are big enough that will actually look good on your Keynote. But we can grab these now. Now, if you see this here, one note is on Chrome. If you do this, I got the same image over here. On Chrome, if I drag this over, what I get is gobbledygook, right? That's the technical term for that, is gobbledygook. And so if I grab it from Safari on the Mac, I get an image. You'll see it. There it is. So there's my image there. So it will, the Safari will handle that connection well, and Chrome does not. So let's see here. I just clicked on the wrong thing there. Let's grab this one here. We'll drag this in. And I will admit that having this opened is something that is a relatively constant thing for me, is to grab onto these things. As usually what happens, I go back and I license a lot of stuff. But when I'm trying to kind of hack through things, I'm often just grabbing stuff that I'm going to use. And then I go, okay, I'll get to that later. Now you'll notice that all of these have their white backgrounds behind them. So when they go over stuff, that's a problem. That's where let's see here. That's where, when we go into, if I select one of these images and I go into image, you'll see instant alpha. When I click and drag, it just goes and grabs all of that, and that's done. So that's now, you'll see that it has an alpha channel now. So I can go here, I can grab instant alpha, and as I pull, it just as you're pulling down on it, it grabs more of the image. So it'll kind of cut into the image as needed. I can select this little one and hit instant alpha, and now it'll grab that one. And you can do things like, for instance, this one still has the white area here. If for some reason I wanted that to be there, I can do another pass of it and go like that. And now it's got an alpha channel on the inside as well. So that's another, kind of like, so now I have this idea, and I can scale it and put it in here. This one's too small, but we'll just scale it up for now. I'm super picky, by the way. If I see any softness at all, I go find another image. So I like my keynotes tend to be really big as a result of that. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to bring these in as a group. So if we're talking about these things here, this one's a little too big. So we'll just bring it down, and I'll decide whether I'm scaling it width-wise or height-wise typically. Now what I can do is I can select these and hit, here, I'll want to group it. So I'll just hit, let's see if I did that right. I always get the key. There's like so many apps and I get the Keynote. So this is Command Option G. And so now they're all an object. And now I can grab this and I can go into the animate and say, I want this one to, we'll see, we'll have this one move in. We'll have this one, to a big scale, and then we'll have this one spin just for fun. There we go. So now I have these set up together, and if I hit play, we'll see this moves in, this pops, and this rotates in. And so that's a pretty typical, way that I'm going to actually, approach that. But this is the kind of thing that I will do instead of doing I will do that instead of doing bullet points. Is thinking about how do I make it graphic and image based for almost everything. So that's about as much text as I like to show, unless the one before was quotes. And so I put a bunch of text on there. But usually what I'm doing is how do I create imagery that is going to describe what I'm talking about, not how do I put the text of what I'm talking about on the screen. I'm trying to show you something that is going to be congruent with what I'm actually talking about. And so that's why I don't need very many bullet points, is because I don't do that. Now let's go to the next question.
The next question is from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. What does Keynote no other presentation software can do?
So I guess I would say that some of the stuff that I've shown you, as far as it's not that no other one can do it, but what I will say is that Insta Alpha, I haven't seen. I don't know if that happened. I don't know if you can do instant alpha on a PowerPoint. And I also a lot of so there's a couple things that make for me. Number one is seamless access to your mobile devices to take pictures, do sketches, do those types of things is I think pretty unique to it. Number two is the Insta Alpha. I don't know of anything else that does it that quickly and easily, if it does it at all. Number three is live video into that John can show. John, if you want to pop that up, John can show that. So what John is showing there is live video going into Keynote and being added as a media object into Keynote. So you can literally be cutting to showing live video, but remember, it's being treated like an object. So he's got rounded corners, and he can animate all of those. That magic move can totally be done with from one screen to another, where he can zoom over. Like, for instance, if you're doing a presentation, exactly. So all of that can be done because it's just like any other object that you have, available to you, except that it's a live video feed, coming in. And that is, that's something that I'm in the process for some of the newer events that or presentations I'm doing. I'm incorporating that more and more, into that process. It's hard for me to show you how I do it and then do it at the same time because I didn't have another digitizer, but that is super powerful, in that process. And so, and then the little things that Keynote seems to do better. Again, the magic move. I don't know if PowerPoint does that, of being able to transition from one slide to another and animate between the two matching objects. I'm not clear that exists. And again, a lot of these things are things that I use pretty heavily, so I'm pretty attached to it. And then, so those are some of the things. And then the little things that Keynote does is that the kerning, the line spacing, and the anti-aliasing are generally better than PowerPoint, and it just looks nicer. Like it's just like what's the difference between a authentic something or other and a fake something or other? There's like lots of little details, like just the feel. There's like this little feel to it that you get from something that's properly engineered, and that's what it feels like when you're using Keynote. When the end slide just happens to look it has that. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it looks nicer than the one that I have. And generally, that's what happens when I pull stuff in. When we rebuild things in Keynote, we have clients that are like, "What happened to how did you do that in PowerPoint?" And I said, "Well, I didn't. Like I took your raw images, and we put them all into Keynote, and it's just the raw images and retyping. Sometimes when you import into PowerPoint, Keynote will try to maintain whatever PowerPoint was doing, and that's not what you want, because usually you want it to ignore that and handle it directly. Next question.
From Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Do you tend to go back and forth, or you only use Keynote on desktop rather than iOS?
So I use Keynote. I start off, as I said before, I draw on it, then I bring it into the desktop. Now, a lot of times I'll send it back over. So I save it into iCloud. And the reason I do that is so that I can run my presentations sometimes on my iPad. So my iPad will be another input into the switcher. And I'm just tapping on it while I'm talking. So that's another way for me to make that available. So I still might use it on my iPad as the presentation device, so that to make everything more complicated, because once it's all built. But what the funny thing is that I won't build it on the iPad. So I'll have my file in iCloud attached to my desktop and opened in my iPad. When I update and I hit save, every time I hit save on the desktop, my iPad, depending on the file size of what I updated, will update almost instantly. So I'll just keep on building what I'm going to show, and my iPad is updating in iCloud. And I will say that I save almost all my keynotes to iCloud because I don't know what device I'm going to show it from, and it's super powerful to have them all up there. I have years of presentations, and a lot of times what happens is I go, "Oh, what did I know I had a slide that talked about that. I'll just go back to some other slide," and it's nice to just have it all in iCloud and be able to download it. Next question.
Our next question is from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Do you use Keynote for live video production with talent inset into pages? If not, why not?
I'm moving towards that. So getting my system set up, the hard part this is the one place that Keynote hasn't fixed yet. And the reason, so when you ask why not, the reason why not is because Keynote doesn't have a virtual camera input and a virtual camera output. So it's not using some kind of siphon device to allow me to bring that video in. That's the big hitch for me, is that I'm using hardware going in and I have one switcher, and I have tried having two switchers, and that gets everything gets confused. The whole, the software, everything doesn't work that way. And so I was using a web presenter. And so then what I was doing with my Extreme was running HDMI out into the web presenter as one of my HDMI outputs. And then back in to Keynote as the source, because then I can just define a source from the switcher to go, which is me, to go into the system. But I gave that to Office Hours 2.0, so right now I have to go get another one. So anyway, which I remembered like last night. So that's why I don't do it. But with my own presentations, I'm starting to plan to build most of my presentations with me in it. And the idea is I'll go full screen. I'll zoom down to one side when I want to show you something. I'll zoom up to a full screen, and I'll show that in the future as I work through that process. Next question.
Our next question is from Eric Price in Kansas City. Alex, you mentioned 5 things that are most important for a good keynote. Care to elaborate for those who didn't see Office Hours the other day?
I think I've covered all of them. I think that I might have covered them all interactively. So one of the most important things is the ability to all the animations. I use all those. I don't use the crazy ones, but I use tons of animations to have things appear. And what I would say is related to that is the fact that it's important from a presentation perspective, in my opinion, to never show the viewer more than what I'm talking about. So I want to, and I also, when I'm done talking about that idea, so you want to think about every slide as an idea. This is a full idea, and these are pieces of that idea. As soon as I get past that, I want to go to another slide. I don't want you thinking about that idea anymore. I want you to think about the new idea. And I have these pieces that I'm going to show you interactively. Pop this piece of this idea, this piece of this idea, this piece of this idea. I guess you could think of it as a paragraph and sentences if you want to think about it that way. And then you want to get it out of there. And so transitions, I think, are really important. The Insta Alpha is really important. The live video is really important. The ability to project into a window, and I don't think I can show that easily here, but one of the things that you can do is in your view or in your play, you can say, I'd like to play in a window instead of full screen. That means that's really built for online presentations, so that you can put a window in and now you can do screen capture to that window. The reason that doesn't work for me is because when you do screen capture, it lowers the frame rate going into Zoom. So even when you set the video, it's kind of got a weird way of interacting. And so the transitions and video and live video, all that stuff doesn't work as well. And so that's why I don't use it as much as I would otherwise. But that live transition, I think, is pretty revolutionary. And then being able to have a seamless integration with your tools, your objects, I think is important. I think that the last thing is that the shape library is really nice. so it's and there's one little thing that I'm still trying to figure out because I haven't had to do it for a while. When you go into the shape library, there's a ton of shapes that you can use, and lots of things have this. But one of the things you can do, like this is a good example of one, and I for some reason I always forget how to do it, so I don't do it often enough. But let's see if I can remember this here. So this is a good example of let me delete some of this stuff out. This specific one is a good example of what I use this feature with. Nobody ever cares about Antarctica. I'm sorry. I mean, I know that I know it's going to raise the sea levels and everything else. And it's very important to the future of the climate and everything else. But when you build a map, you're always like, really? Did you have to put this here? Like, this is not something that I needed. What I can do is I can right click on this and say make editable, and you'll see all these points. And now, I can right click it. Let's do that again. Make editable. And then I can delete all these buttons and get rid of that. Get rid of Antarctica. Every time I use a world map, I get rid of Antarctica. Like that's the because it takes up a bunch of space. So anyway, so that's that. The one thing that you'll see here is my shapes. These are shapes that I, have brought in from other places. I don't know if I can still do this. So I have to figure this out. One thing that it's been hard to do is to so I this is one of the things I use a lot. So I go, okay, there's a person that's going to be standing here and here, and then I'll have and then I have a sat truck that's going to go here, and I can change this, whatever. And so building your own are really useful, but getting Illustrator files in has required like a script to get AI files and SVG files into Keynote. I wish they would fix that. Oops, I hit the wrong button again. Next question.
Our next question is from Greg Swick in Irwin, Pennsylvania. I hear you don't like bullets. Why?
Bullet points are probably the most telltale sign that you're in a corporate presentation. And I want my stuff to look like broadcast. So when I'm presenting to you, I want to have that, that piece. So it's not that I don't show lists. I just try to find a way that shows it, that looks more like a broadcast. So like, I'll look at like how Sunday Night Football shows you stats, or how something like that. And I'm going to look at how do they do that? How do they present that data? And I want to present it in a way that doesn't look like a presentation, because that, it's just, it elevates the viewer's experience and the viewer's impression of what you're trying to do. Next question. And I actually want to say one thing before you ask that question, is that I am going to be proving over and over and over every week, starting next week, that you can use Keynote as a video production tool. Like, that's the thing that I'm pushing through, and I'll be talking about. It's not perfectly seamless, so I'm going to talk about that and kind of do it. But really using it as a way to build quick videos that have lots of graphics is something that I think is important to teachers. That's why we're talking about in the teacher area. But even just the presentations are good, but also that. Next question.
This one is labeled education, but it's around Keynote, so I'll still go ahead.
Yeah.
Kristen Osterkamp in Germany. How did Keynote change the way you think about putting together topics to present, and also create new ideas of what can be done with it in other contexts than lecturing?
I think it's just the fact that I suddenly realized here's what happened was I sent a Keynote to someone. I was going to do a presentation. They weren't available, and I recorded it. Like, I just literally, there's a feature in Keynote that says just record my presentation. And what it'll do is it'll save it out as a QuickTime movie, and it'll just do all the transitions and everything else. So you can just go through it, and it's not screen capturing, it's remembering everything and then rendering it. And I just did that, and I sent it to them. And literally the whole company saw it. like it was like, I mean, every time I went to a meeting, they were like, "Oh, I saw your video," and about this. And to me, it was like a sketch of an idea. And then and that was years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And it really sunk in that that's the way to flip a classroom, is to use Keynote for that, rather, because what happens is, to do what I'm doing, all the little things I just showed you in Motion or Final Cut or in After Effects or Premiere or whatever, it's a lot of work, and it's too much work for a communicator to throw together for an idea. You need to be able to put it together faster, but you also want a video. What we don't want to be stuck with just presenting in real time. We want to send that to somebody, let them watch it, and then come with Q&A, to make that work. But that's how I started to really think about it as a bigger project. Next question.
George Butters in Halifax. How do you control video resolution in Keynote for videos that you output as .mov files?
Hold on, let me take a look here. So let me see if I can pull that over for you. Yeah, so here is the cut. So here is the playback itself, and then I can have the resolution here is 1080p. That's what I usually run at. But I can do custom, and now I can give it, really whatever resolution that I want. Frame rates including 5994 and 2997, compression type. So I can literally output this as a Apple ProRes 4x4. And as a note, when you do that, I believe, I haven't done it with a whole slide deck. I usually do it with one image, but typically it'll send out the alpha channel. so you can create stuff here for that. But these are, so you can literally build something. And I have used this recently. There was a video that I did that was actually, I just realized it was going to be easier to do this in Keynote than Motion. Like I was like, oh, I got all these little things, these ideas that I want to pop up. And I was like, I'm just going to render it out. And I just rendered it out as ProRes, dropped it into my project and kept going, and that was a faster way to do it than using Motion. Next question.
Our next question is from Steve Cotton in San Francisco Bay Area. Is there a way to get an alpha channel output from Keynote?
Yeah, I think that there is let's see if we go to this here, images, and if we go to TIFF, I believe that this will, let's see, from 8 to 8. So I do TIFF, well, we'll do ping here, and I will send that out. I'm just going to send it to my desktop. Let's just see what we got here, whether that went out with an alpha channel or not. It didn't come back in. Hold on. I'm not sure the ping worked. I know that we've done this in the past, so I haven't needed to do that a ton of times. But with stills, and I believe with the video, you'll get the animated lower the third. But we'll have to. We'll come back to that. But I'm almost certain. Well, I am certain I've done it before. I just can't think of where I. Oh, it's because I had a background. Hold on. So hold on. Let me change this. This may actually be in. I'll have to play with it a little bit. It's because there's a white background in the background there. So I need to, I'm not set up for that, but I know I can do it. So I think it's just going and turning off the background. Oh, it's in the slide. Hold on. Let me, let's see. There is of course, now I'm obsessed with it. So this is I know that there's a place in here. There we go. So to get that out, you just say no fill for the background for the slate. Now it'll still look white here, but I'm almost certain now if I export it. So if I say export to images, and we'll go number 8, and let's go to pin. Oh, yeah, see, export with see here it says export now. Now that I turned that off, export with transparent backgrounds. So when applies only when a slide background is set to no fill or has transparency. So now you can even have, you could have it be semi-transparent. You can have it be totally transparent. So those, that's how that works there. So what were you gonna say, John?
This is exactly how Chris Fenwick does his lower thirds. It does exactly that.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, so that's, and again, that's a good example of being able to throw things together, really quickly and have them pop up. Next question.
Our next question is from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. How do you handle presentations with significant amounts of technical content? What if your audience asks for the information to review afterwards and the slide deck is stark?
I build 2 documents. So that's how I do that. So I build a document in Keynote. I think that there's I think building a slide deck that is, and trying to put all the information into it makes it unwatchable. So like why would I do that? So my whole thing is I want to show you the concepts and I want to bring out those things that I want to talk. And maybe I have an example of some data or some graphs or whatever. Then I'm going to give you a slide deck. And a lot of times what I'll do in this, or not a slide deck, sometimes I give you a slide deck for print, but sometimes I'll go into Pages and make a pretty one. But what I will do oftentimes is I will export JPEGs out of, my whole slide deck out as JPEGs. I will then bring them into Pages. So when I'm talking about stuff, I use them as examples. And the reason for that is so that people can refer back to what I said and what they saw in the slide deck back to something that is more prose. But Pages is the right doc. If you're going to put a ton of text into it, Pages is your friend. If you're going to do a presentation, Keynote is your friend. This is a hammer nail thing, like the nail is the Keynote and the little wood screw is is Pages. Do not use the hammer on the screw. Use the screwdriver for the screw. So that's my opinion. Next question.
Our next question comes from Olivar Rouchard in Saigon, Vietnam. What is the way to generate and use a key and a fill on Keynote slide with an ATEM Mini Extreme? There must be a way.
So there's no alpha channel that you can do to do that. And yes, we all wish that Keynote had some support for a key fill output. I think that at least once a year I put it in the suggestions in Keynote. I think we should all do that. We'll talk about that. We might get all of us to get like 150 people to say, I really want key fill output from Keynote. The way that I do it right now is to do it with a, let's see if I can set this up real quickly here. I think I might have actually a presentation that did that. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to find something relatively quickly here. But the I had it. Anyway, the here we go. Hold on. So let's see what I do here. If I do, and now let me see. Okay. So now what I'll do is just give me 1 second here to be a little bit of a lab. I'm going to bring up my ATEM. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let me bring up my ATEM software. So this is the way you can do it right now, and you have to be kind of conscious to what you're doing. But let me go ahead and cut to this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into my switcher, and I'm going to go into my palettes, and I'm going to see my. I am going to go into my. I have an upstream key which I could use. I think I can just use the downstream key. So let me go to the downstream key here. And I can say I want the fill source from my downstream key to be the, let's see, camera 8. I also want my key source to be camera 8. And then what I'm going to do is I have this not set to pre-multiplied because that won't work. Now, if I hit this, what hopefully will happen here, this is very dangerous. Yeah, it turned black because I didn't get it on there. So hold on, let's see. So we have this here, and I will figure out. So it is. I do have the right key there. Let me. There we go. So I'm going to turn that invert key off. So now you can see me kind of playing with a key here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut back to myself. That's what I'm doing. And I'm playing with this key to get all my detail back in. So this is a Luma key. And so now you can see that it's there. Now why that's important is if I, let me cut to, I'm going to back up a little bit. So now that's an object coming in. That's there. So that's Keynote being Luma keyed over top of my frame. And I can just go like that. I don't know if I have. It's my name. so there's so this is like a little, so I can have all those animations that I wanted out of Keynote. And I can simply just sit there and tap things, and this is going to pop in, and then this is going to pop over there. And so that's all done. That's an animation in Keynote. And what you have to be careful of when you do a Luma key is that you don't have a lot of soft edges. So blurs don't work. So you want nice hard edges. You don't want things that are close to it. But you can do a lot of things with this. So for instance, I make if you make everything in your image like 3% black, you just move the black point up a little bit, you can actually key it with Luma key with a hard edge really, really easily. So that's one way that's how you can start to use Keynote live in your presentations. Next question.
Our next question comes from Robert Soji in Los Angeles. Can you talk a bit about importing a Keynote build into a short film?
The way that I would do that is what I talked about before, which is to export out as a. So when you go into it, if you wanted to put it into a short film, this is export your presentation, and so it can be self-playing. You can put your own audio into each slide if you want to. You can also in the presentation tools, and I think I can't show this, but I can say record. Let's see if I have. Oh no, it went into mode. But I can set in under play. I can say record it, and I can literally record out what I want to say. So I can just do the presentation, or I can put audio on every slide and then just go forward, or hit autoplay and it'll just play it out. So I can record audio for each slide if I want to. Next question.
Our next question is from Mark Giuliani in Alexandria. How many live video feeds can you use simultaneously?
So far in our testing, it's as many as I can plug into the computer. So if the computer can see it in the pipeline, it'll go into it. We haven't tried to put like a big black magic board in, but I think I put 4 in so far as a test without any main issue. So again, that gets into some really we did some earlier tests with this. That gets into a really exciting mode where, as a teacher, I can have an overhead of something I want to show, and then I can have so I can have an overhead as a teacher and myself, and you can sit there and go big on the overhead with you and small, and then you big with the overhead small, and then fly that out and fly something in, and so you can have lots of different inputs. And we'll talk about that more in the future. I think we'll end up probably doing a whole hour on just the live video and what you can do with it. I just need a little more time to present that. Next question.
Our next question is from Mark Giuliani, again in Alexandria, Virginia. If you want to appear on camera during the presentation as a picture-in-picture, is there a standard place for where you should appear? Upper, lower, right, or left?
I actually like to change it. So I like to appear in different places where it makes sense around my image. But I also like to, kind of surprise people with where it's going to go. And by keeping it, when you keep anything in the same place all the time, the brain will start to filter it out. So I think it's interesting. And I like to put it where it makes the most sense for that given thing. Next question.
Our next question is from Steve Cotton in San Francisco. Is there a way to add to the shapes menu a logo or objects you have scanned?
Scanned, yeah. So there is a way to do it, but it is a hack, and it's kind of a nutty hack. There is an AI to Keynote script, and I actually don't know if it works. And I couldn't get it to work in my current build so I used it in a previous in Catalina, and basically it's a script that will take your AI files and one at a time you can put them in, and it'll put them into a new folder. You'll see that I have that right now. In here I have under shape. You can see that I have shapes. These are Illustrator files, that I brought in using that, and it's just updated into it. So so there are definitely ways to do that, but right now they've been a hack, and I don't quite understand why we can't import like an SVG, but there's no way that I know of to do it any other way than that hack. If you do a search for AI to Keynote, you'll see the little script that runs, and you could potentially do it. You could potentially save it in an older version of the Mac and then do it, but I haven't been able to get it to work in the newest version of the OS. Next question.
Our next question is from George Butters in Halifax. Do you have any questions for getting the best quality into and out of Keynote when creating audio or video files?
Saving it out and having it export is the best way to get the highest quality. For audio, again, I record that when I'm doing audio. I'm using this system, so I have a professional mic going into some kind of professional interface that then will be recorded by Keynote. If I'm going to do the voiceover, so it's the same system that I have there. Is the same way that I'm going to approach it. For anything else that I do. Next question.
Our next question comes from Robert Soji in Los Angeles. Can Keynote simulate someone typing a word or phrase?
I think it can actually. Hold on. I don't do that often, but let's take a look at it real quick here. So if we have this is someone typing I think that one of my animation options is key. There it is. So yeah, so that's the, and you can, here you can, you can't really control every word, but you can, lengthen that out a little bit. We'll hit preview again. So that's so keyboard is the thing that you're trying to look for that. Next question.
All right. Stefan's going to take over for me. So I'll read this one. And
Okay.
then okay, awesome. All right. Craig McFarlane in Boston. Any stability gotchas between systems when sharing Keynote presentations like live video sources?
I have not tried to save a live video source out for anybody to use other than me. So we have to test that. But we'll do a whole session on live video sources. Next question.
How do you send a Keynote presentation to someone using a Windows PC?
What I do is I export them as, I will either export it as a movie and send it to them, or I'll export it as frames, like individual frames for it. And I get rid of all the transitions and just export just export it as frames without the builds. And then I'll put them back into PowerPoint and then I'll send it to them as whole images. That's usually, that's kind of our worst case scenario for a lot of things. Like if we have a PowerPoint and they've got lots of extra stuff in it and we don't have a way to play it back, the thing you do is export all the frames. Next question. Can't hear you, Stefan. I can't hear you, Stefan.
I'm sorry. This next one is from Chris Widener from Lafayette. When building animated lower thirds in Keynote with ProRes 4444, have you had any problems getting headshots color accurate in the atom skin tones always seem off?
I have never tried that. So to have a headshot with 4444 in it, that's definitely a place where I've kind of, when I have to have fine color, I've definitely generally moved to motion or Final Cut at that point. Next question.
The next one is from John Foyce. Can you talk about your experiences linking on one Keynote page to another?
Yeah, I have not. I will admit that I have not used that heavily. Let's see if we can figure that out real quickly, though. So I believe that if I have this here, and I will admit that this is you're now officially outside of my because I don't usually send these out, and I usually don't need to click somewhere. I am not certain. I know that it's possible, but I have not needed to do that. So I am, because I'm going to where here's add slide. Okay. So under format, there's add link. So this is to the next slide, previous slide. Let's say I want to make this to go to slide 3. It's in the format section. So we'll say go to slide. So now if we go back to this, and we hit play, and I have this type in. So this is typing the thing in. Now I have it typing very slowly now because I was showing it as an example. Now let's see if this will actually work. Yep. So that's it. So basically it is under format, and you'll see add link near the bottom, and that will do it. And that can be an object. It can be anything. It can be an object or text. Next question.
Next one comes from John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. Is there an align/distribute tool in Keynote, or is only snap to align?
You can definitely do that. So let's see here. And I will admit, hold on. Yeah, sorry about that. So we'll try it here. Let's try these guys here. So we'll do this. And then under arrange, I know I'm on a different screen, so it's a little harder, but under arrange, there's align objects, and I can say align them by the middle, and they're all aligned there. And then I can say I want to distribute them evenly, and they're all like that. So that was That's a pretty standard tool for a lot of tools, and it's under the arrange, under align objects and distribute objects. Next question.
Next one comes from Matt Cole from Montreal. Just a side note, everything you have shown in the first 25 minutes is also easily doable in PowerPoint.
Well, there we go. So hopefully, I'd have to see that. I'd have to see it done in PowerPoint.
It just won't look good.
Yeah, we haven't found that PowerPoint just looks as good as what Keynote does. And again, but it definitely could be possible there. Next question.
This will be the last question for today from George Butters from Halifax. To make an alpha, set the slide background to no fill.
Yep, absolutely. So that's what we figured out. I think, George, I'm sure put that in while we were still figuring it out. So that's that's an introduction. I think that, again, what I will say about PowerPoint is that it's not that you can't do these. And if you can take these to, I'd love to have someone come in as a PowerPoint expert and show us, maybe we have like a PowerPoint person, a Google Slides person, and us, and have us talk about, well, how do you do this? Like there could be a great hour where we just say, can you do this? And we can come up with, does it work as well? Is it as good? Is it whatever? I think that there's, if you can easily do it, that's great. I haven't found that most of the stuff that I've been talking about, it's not that it can't be done. It's that it either can't be done as easily or as well, or it doesn't look as good. It's just that and again, it's, cars all have wheels and they have brakes and gas pedals and they have radios, but the interface to how that works is different. So it, there's a difference between there is a difference between a BMW and smaller cars. So in the fit and finish of the process. And so I think that that's the thing that a lot of Keynote folks get used to in doing that. And we have found that working with media like videos inside a Keynote, not inside of PowerPoint, oftentimes is not a great experience. So anyway, so that's the thing is, but I would love for someone to come in with both slides and PowerPoint and show me why they can do everything that I can do in Keynote in PowerPoint, because then it'll make me smarter. Because right now I stopped using PowerPoint years ago. I mean, other than converting stuff to Keynote, I probably haven't built a deck in PowerPoint since 2000. So, because I did it for Windows 2000 launch. so anyway, so I think that's the last time I built a whole deck in PowerPoint. So what I know from PowerPoint is how to strip things out of it and move it into Keynote. So if someone here is an expert in PowerPoint, I also know that until only a couple of years ago, every production company, if you gave us a slide, it wasn't just me, it was like everybody we worked with until probably 2015. Would strip every Google slide and PowerPoint, every major event. We would just strip them out and put them into Keynote. And that wasn't like, that was big companies, including companies that made the presentation tools. so anyway, things would get just ripped out. And at some point, someone said, hey, you can't do that because we're making the product. So we have to use our own product. But it was a kind of a common thing in presentation companies to pull it out. And a lot of that had to do less with feature sets and more with stability and the ability for a Mac to handle video outputs correctly. And there's a whole bunch of things that was related to. So I think that a lot of us just kind of built up that process. But again, if someone's watching here and they say they can do it as well or better, all the things I just showed, as well or better than on PowerPoint, I invite you to come and do a presentation for us and answer questions, because I think we do need to know how to do it. I don't think all of us are using Macs. So same thing with Google Slides. If you want to show up and talk about not maybe even how it reproduces what Keynote does, but what it does that makes it special, definitely let me know, because we'd love to have you on. I mean, and I say that truthfully. I'd really love to learn more about the different presentation tools. I just only know one at this point, and I use it all day. so it's probably the tool I spend more time on than anything else. Anyway, I hope that was useful. A useful hour. It's kind of like a random thing of this is what I do. My goal is that I'm gonna be doing a bunch of these. I'm gonna be using Keynote as a video production tool for Mac Break, my Mac Break picks starting probably next week or the week after, and I'll have these popping up. And what I'm going to be doing is publishing those. At first, it'll just be to the office hours groups, and maybe only, I don't know, we'll see. But I'll be publishing those Keynote documents, so you can just look at what I did. Like, oh, I can, this is how I did that, and people want to ask questions about it, we can, that kind of thing. And yeah, so I think that's it for today. And I want to thank everybody for jumping in and asking great questions and having a great conversation. I was a little afraid, I was like, if no one asks any questions, this is going to be really short, because I'm not very good at walking through things in detail like that. So it's easier for me to just respond to it. So when we come up with these again, I do plan to spend more time on it. I will admit that some of my interest in Keynote of wanting to talk about it now is because I think that there's new tools that we're probably going to see this year. I don't have any information. It's not like I know anybody there, but I think that there's a lot of stuff warming up that you can kind of see the tea leaves. And I think that we want to be ready for, because I think that if the things that we're already seeing in the operating system, so if we see things like USDZ added to Keynote, I don't think we're going to see that in other applications anytime soon. So I think this is going to be something you're going to want to use. And so I think that we want to keep learning about it. Anyway, and I hope that someone here knows things that I don't know about Keynote and will come up and show me. So I use it in a very specific way. And I know that there's a whole world of stuff that I don't know how to do. So anyway, so thanks so much. And now we're going to jump remember, we're doing cooking tomorrow, right after the show. And then, but right now we'll do after hours. See you soon.